Pleased to see so many people here, and what I'm going to present to you is the future of zero emissions, and actually the title of my presentation was given by Heidi, so I'm here to deliver the response to it. Now, this decade we are entering a crucial period. We need to enter into a firm turning point in our response to the climate and ocean challenges. That is a clear scientific advice to us, and that is also the most crucial challenge for shipping and the IMO in the coming decade. So this is the decade we are entering into. I want to start actually, but to see how we have done this previously. So we have actually had decades of environmental challenges for shipping. Starting with the 60s and 70s, I'm born in 1963, so that is a natural starting point. In 67, we have a severe tanker accident outside the south coast of England, the Torrey Canyon. We had also other accidents, but this was a major one, leading to the Marple Conference in 1973, simply because the global community wanted to respond to it. And the focus of the first response was to establish the framework, the Marple Convention, which then is the global framework for international shipping when it comes to environmental requirements. And the focus was pollution prevention. That was the 70s response to the challenge. Moving into the 1980s and 90s, we all remember those, the rust buckets. That was actually a situation in the 80s. Too many substandard ships were operating. And the challenge internationally and also for shipping was to implement this Marple Convention. So in the 80s it was focused on the implementation of the requirements. However, we also remember this one. In the early 90s in Alaska, we had the Exxon Valdez, meaning that still it was a focus of preventing accidents. Preventing accidents was the main focus. And in addition, we had the North Sea conferences in the 80s because the ocean situation in the North Sea, North Sea was in big trouble. So we had the political conference, the North Sea conferences, leading also to the widening of the Marple Convention, having the air pollution annex. So we established the air pollution requirements also for shipping. Moving on after the millennium, and I need to do this fast because it's a long story and I only have 15 minutes. What we can see at the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, it was a closer interaction with other UN processes, the global challenges, meaning that the environmental framework of the IMO became more complete. Here is the ballast water illustration. We established the Ballast Water Convention, and we also have other environmental challenges responded to by the IMO. So the task we responded to and what we did in these 2 decades was to improve and minimize. And this is the bunker sample, meaning that the air pollution index we established in the 90s, we improved in 2008. And I think we can characterize this period by improving and minimizing. And also we responded to climate change by establishing energy efficiency requirements. Now, moving into the coming period from 2020 and onwards, clearly the ocean challenges is very much upfront, not only rising ocean sea levels because of climate change, because you also have marine plastic litter and overfishing, etc., etc. And clearly the task at the IMO is to continue to make the framework more complete. Science and the dramatic effects of climate change clearly put also climate change in the as a priority of the IMO. And here I come to the zero, simply because what is now the identified need for us to achieve is the zero emission target. And what I think is important to see that here we have a lot of actions leading to a response which you can characterize in this way when it comes to the international framework. And all this have happened, I think this is very important, in a period of significant geopolitical changes. In that period, it was mainly the OECD countries deciding about things. Now it's different. Now it's completely different. And that is also important to take into account when we're going to respond to the future challenges. So, from looking into this, I think we can see what we have been aiming at is to minimize and phase out. This is the development of oil spills when it comes to accidents. You can see the red curve there is the increase of tanker activity, and the other curve is the number of incidents from oil tankers, meaning it's a clear improvement as a result of the framework. Going into the other, the term phasing out, when it comes to, for instance, anti-fouling systems, we had prohibited the most dangerous one, the organotins. So clearly also phasing out when we have identified a problem, it has been a challenge, a response by the IMO. Ballast water, clearly to minimize and to eventually eliminate has been the response by the IMO, and we are now entering the phase where we're going to implement the treatment system into the ship. We're going to phase them in and do that for all ships by the end of 2024. Meaning we have a direction towards, tending towards zero. And this is the plenary of the IMO. And the 13th of April 2018, we achieved a historical agreement. This is the Secretary General of the IMO, Kita Glim's characterization. He said this is an historic moment. Even the UN Secretary General identified this as a major step forward in global action to combat climate change. And what we agreed to was the initial strategy on reduction of GHG emission from ships. What is this strategy? The strategy defines where we want to go, meaning ambitions, and briefly the route towards our destination. That is the IMO strategy. The important elements of the strategy, it contains a vision. It aims to phase out greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible in this century. It's 8 years. It is from this moment and forward, it is 8 years. Same time as it is from this moment until the start of the Second World War. That is the time period we have in order to phase these emissions out. And also more specific ambitions identified in 3 ways. We need to improve the energy efficiency design index of new ships entering into the market. And we have follow-up on that one. We are doing it in negotiations at the IMO. Also, we need to reduce the CO emission per transport work, meaning the carbon intensity of international shipping. Emit less CO2 per transport work. So that is a target where we have a 40% reduction by 2030 and pursuing efforts towards 70% by 2050. And then the largest challenge perhaps is the ambition to have a total reduction by at least 50% by 2050 compared to 2008. Some people will say this is only 50%. However, take into account that global trade is still growing and shipping is still growing to serve the global economy, and it is a quite big challenge. So this is the identification of what we have agreed to as an ambition in the strategy. However, there are conditions to the ambitions, and this is very important. It is impossible to achieve without further technical innovation and the introduction of alternative fuels and/or energy sources. If we do not do this, it is impossible to achieve that ambition. Let's look into the situation if we look into the future. So here is a high growth and low growth scenario, business as usual. Meaning this is the various decades of ships and how much they will contribute to emissions if you look into this curve. Meaning that, okay, old ships will be phased out, but you will see that in 2050 there will be still ships built in 2020 to 2030 operating. But the larger share will be for the ships in the future. The implication of this one, I think this is important, the ships being built now in the 10-year period need to improve their carbon intensity. The fleet need to improve the carbon intensity by 50% in the low growth scenario and 70% in the high growth scenario compared to 2015. Meaning that you need to be more efficient, and in order to be more efficient, of course, you need to take several measures, but also it need to have less fossil fuels into the energy supply of shipping. That is the implications. You need to do more and more in the coming decades when it comes to how ships will contribute to emission reductions. In the IMO strategy, and this is the agreed document, and I have tried to identify for you what it contains and what we are doing. Here you see there we will revise the strategy every 5 years, as it is in the Paris Agreement. So it is a revision every 5 years. And you will also see that when it comes to the consideration of the various measures, we have not agreed on those ones. We are negotiating upon them. But the ones I have highlighted is actually that we have identified that we need to do something when it comes to the energy sources used by shipping. First, we will assess the carbon intensity of the fuels. That is very important in order to know what is the best fuel to use in relation to climate change. Then we have agreed to have implementation program for uptake of low carbon and zero carbon fuels, and then to establish provisions for low carbon and zero carbon fuels. That is the intent in the strategy. We have actually had quite a lot of follow-up after the 2018 when we adopted the strategy. First, what we agreed to was to have a program of follow-up action. So the strategy defines where you want to go, and then we have a more specific program of follow-up actions. Okay, so it was planning, and this is what it's a time schedule of what we have to do when. And then we also in April 2000 actually approved energy efficiency Design-X improvements, meaning that the requirements which were supposed to trigger in 2025 for ships being constructed in 2025, we moved forward to 2022, and also we did some adjustments of the requirements in this framework. So this was approved and is expected to be adopted at the coming session in next spring. So even tighter requirements for shipping. And we also agreed to enter into the phase 4 of the Energy Efficiency Design Index. So we also approved terms of reference for the IMO GHG study. And this is very important. Before we adopt new measures, we have agreed to assess impact on states for candidate measures. Meaning that it is clearly also when it comes to measures challenging for various states around the world. And before member states agree to measures, they also need to know the impacts on various states before the measure is agreed to. So the procedures for assessing those impacts we have actually now adopted. And we also needed to agree to speed up. So we will have 2 more intersessional meetings, and we are entering to the first one in November. And we also agreed on a resolution, meaning a voluntary action on how ports and shipping can cooperate in order to reduce GHG emissions. So we are on our way in the follow-up. However, now the real test starts. In November we will have our first negotiations on the requirements which we plan to establish for shipping. So we have now several proposals submitted into the IMO, many documents which will then be treated. That is the terms of reference for the meeting, and I don't expect you to that you need to read it. That terms of reference is also negotiated text. The point is, we will negotiate new energy efficiency requirements for all ships, and also we will start to work on the new fuels. And looking into the new fuels, clearly if you have the 50% reduction target as the green line, and this is the business as usual scenario having the same carbon intensity as of 2018, you will see that logistical improvements is needed, energy efficiency improvement is needed, also maybe speed reduction, but the point is it is impossible to achieve those reductions without other types of fuels. This is how DNV GL see the future. You see today it is mainly heavy fuel oil combined with marine gas oil, and we are entering into a new phase with other fuel mix. I don't say this is correct, but it will be different than it is today. I see that I'm running out of time. I would say that there are three main elements in responding to the IMO challenge. One, we need to have national spearhead policies, and in Norway we have now a green action plan for green shipping. The international requirements need to be improved, and also we need to assist developing countries. And by that, we may succeed in having a future of zero emissions in shipping. We have identified a firm response to the challenge, and we are entering a crucial decade for shipping and the IMO, and that was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.